Okay, so I think I can take over here now. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Tal. A very warm thank you also to the whole Transmeet team for hosting this fantastic event and for having us here today and letting us join and share in the conversation. On behalf of the European Commission STARTS initiative, my name is Kristina Maurer. I'm a cultural producer, curator, and exhibition developer based at Ars Electronica in Linz, Austria, and also a part and partner of the STARTS initiative, together with Ars Electronica and many other partners, cultural partners, institutions all across Europe. And today what we actually want to do is talk about the wonderful opportunities that lie in collaborating and co-working between artists and scientists and technology partners. And I have with me tonight actually the artists Michelle Malghaes. Maybe she will have to correct me, I think, on the pronunciation very briefly, and Pei Ying Lin. And we were also supposed to be joined by João Martinho Moura, who unfortunately, due to a short notice occurrence, cannot join us today. But we are very happy to have Pei and Michelle with us and to have them share with us their experiences. True in the fashion of collaboration, we are going to have a shared presentation also, so we are all using one kind of workspace, and I'm going to navigate you through the whole session now on the workspace as Michelle and Pei will introduce their work. So let me just here start sharing my screen. And before we dive into the session, which is called STARTS Practices, Collaboration as Catalyst, I actually want to say a few words about what STARTS is and about what its core ideas are. So STARTS stands for Science, Technology and the Arts, and to be more precise, innovation at the nexus of science, technology and arts. It's an initiative of the European Commission that was founded in 2015 or started in 2015. And it's built on the vision that there is a really urgent need at the moment of developing sustainable and, most importantly, human-centered models for innovation. Not only on the European continent, but globally, of course. And most importantly, STARTS sees a huge potential in creating collisions between artists and scientists, technology and art. And it also very strongly believes, the whole initiative, all partners, that these collisions can act as catalysts for innovation, and also for the development of new economic, social, and business models. So it values thinking out of the box and bringing together all kinds of practitioners, creative practitioners, and players that you might not at first see in a relationship with each other, and creating together prototypes, artworks, and in general creative output. STARTS is actually not just one thing. It's built on several pillars or cornerstones: the STARTS Prize, the STARTS Residencies, the STARTS Regional Centers, STARTS Thematic Pilots, and the STARTS Academies. The STARTS Prize is the STARTS Initiative's yearly competition. It singles out once a year the most outstanding examples of transdisciplinary practice at the intersection of art, technology, and science. And most importantly, artworks, artists, and projects that have a real potential to have a significant impact on social and also economic innovation. There are two main prizes which are given in the categories of artistic innovation, so artistic works that influence and change the way we look at technology. And also another category called innovative collaboration, which focuses on promising forms of collaboration between the world of art and culture and the private sector. And some of you who are watching might know the Ars Electronica Festival, which takes place every year in September, as the STARTS Prize is coordinated by Ars Electronica together with two other institutions, Beaux-Arts in Brussels and Bach in Amsterdam. These projects are also every year showcased at the Ars Electronica Festival. We also have the STARTS Academies. STARTS Academies actually reach out to the youngest among us, to young adults and children, and they aim to introduce these young group of our society to the how exciting it can be to bring science and art together, and to do this in kind of engaging and playful ways at the same time. We have the STARTS thematic pilots. So these are pilots and projects that actually tackle very concrete challenges. Currently, we have 2 running STARTS pilots that also host residencies and bring in artists. Reframe is a project that is focused on the future of fashion and fashion design, and specifically focused on how we can move from fast fashion models of design to sustainable, locally located fashion production that works with innovative materials, that uses local resources, and that in the most ideal case also transfers us to a circular way of fashion production. And the second thematic pilot that's currently running is called Mindspaces. And Mindspaces is focused on developing new models of spatial design that are adaptive to the end users. So they work with virtual reality, with augmented reality, and also artificial intelligence technologies and all kinds of sensing technologies to develop spaces that or to develop concepts for how we can really adapt a space and our living environments to the needs of the end users. And then just let me zoom out here while I find what I was looking for before. We have also the STARTS regional centers. STARTS regional centers focus on locating STARTS in local communities and local networks. And this is really focusing on the idea that STARTS can be a movement that connects local CCI, local companies and SMEs, research institutions with each other, brings them together with artists, and through programs such as exhibitions, such as conferences and residencies, actually introduces the potential of bringing together art, technology, and science, not only through residencies that connect artists internationally together with partners, but also in a sustainable way building local networks. And building communities that really recognize the potential of science, technology, and art collaborations. And last but not least, we are also going to have somebody here today who is part of the STARTS Residencies. STARTS Residencies is another program of STARTS that was aimed or is aimed at artists who have a very specific idea of how to apply a technology, and it brings together the artists in a collaborative model with science and technology partners. And in tandem, these partners develop innovative artworks and prototypes that highlight inspiring use cases of technology. So that's just a very brief introduction into the STARTS initiative and where STARTS is kind of coming from, how long it has been running, and the kind of many branches that it goes into in all of its pillars and cornerstones. Today, what we want to focus on is the topic of collaboration as catalyst. And for that purpose, we are joined by Michelle, who I now very kindly ask to, to maybe help me quickly with how I pronounce her last name.
It's Michelle Agnes Magalhaes. Or Magalhaes.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much for helping me out here. So we are joined by Michelle, Magalhaes, and Pei Ying Lin. Michelle actually took part in the STARTS Residencies program, and Pei Ying Lin this year was part of the STARTS Prize and actually received an honorary mention within the STARTS Prize 2020. And what we want to focus on now with Pei and with Michelle is kind of how do artists reflect on their own creative practice at the nexus of science, technology, and the arts, and more specifically, how does it work in practice to work on artistic projects with collaboration partners? And for that purpose, I'm now going to introduce Michelle a little more deeply before I hand over the mic to her and ask her to introduce her project Constellations. So Michelle is a Brazilian composer. With her music, she places a high premium on the engagement of the musician's body, as well as on new approaches to musical instruments. Since 2017 to 18, she is also a Radcliffe Fellow at Harvard University. In 2019, she has created Constellations, a collective interactive musical experience with web devices, which she's actually now going to introduce us to. And she's actually now at the lab where she has worked and developed this artwork. So maybe we can see a little sneak peek of what the working environment looks there also.
Thank you so much, Kristina, for the introduction. And thank you very much for the invitation. So, as you said, I'm at IRCAM now. I'm talking from Paris. And I also like to present my collaborator, Frédéric Bevilacqua. He's also here with us, connected by Zoom. Yes. And we are not together in the same space because of the mask. He prepared to show us, to show you our faces. So this is basically the environment who we exchanged so much during all the time of the residence, and was such a great collaboration. We continue to work together from this work, and the residencies, this residency worked really great in this sense. From one project, so many projects come out. And so I do a general presentation about myself. I'm a Brazilian composer, musician, and this is great to work at IRCAM because Frédéric Bevilacqua and Benjamin Matuszewski are scientists, but also musicians. So it was easy to connect and to find the vocabulary, all these things come easily together. But they are part of a team that's called Interaction, Sound, Music, Movement Team, ESMM at IRCAM. So basically, I think this explains a lot of the project, is how the connection between music, sound, and movement works, and how to use that as a start point for something. So the inspiration comes basically from the music, in the sense that as musicians, do you know, we are reading music, approaching symbolic notation, moving when playing an instrument, moving with the entire body or just fingers. But musicians also, they have a tactile feedback while playing. They are also listening, perceiving, analyze sound during the performance, and recovering memories, because we can also talk about sound memory, or sound as a memory. And they are also taking decisions during they are playing. So this is very rich, and this is a universe that the neuroscientists, they are crazy about, because this situation is not a normal situation. You have so many parts of the brain that is working together, putting together to provide all this whole work. And as musicians and passionate by music, our question was, how could we make it accessible for everybody? How a music experience, in this sense, can be made available. So this team, they were also already working on a project using web audio technologies and using web devices, everyday devices, as a cell phone or tablets or web devices for making music. So that was the point when I began this project, because it totally makes sense that you are trying to make it accessible with tools that people have at home. Also, without all this thing to have to buy a software or to have to install something. So this web audio approach seems to me totally perfect to put this project together. And in this sense, collaboration it was the really a deep term used in our interaction. I also love that he used catalyst, because this is not the kind of project that I could do alone. It was not something as sometimes as composers we can propose something to another person, to a performer, and you can work in different time or different moments. But this project we need that everything need to be connected and everything was made at the same time. So the collaboration in this case, it means to work in the instrument. Instrument means to turn the cell phone in an instrument or musical instrument. The interface, the kind of sound and movement interaction, and also developed these two Como elements, that is the web tool developed by the team. And everything was like growing up together. Also because during this time, we were also thinking about how to approach sound and movement as a unity, and how to compose musical structures, because we are a little pretentious. So the goal of this thing was not only to work as musical game, but also to give to this work a musical form, a real musical form in terms of development and form. Also, one thing was important is to reflect about the way to communicate these musical situations or musical pieces and how to play it. Basically, how to play it, this is the rule of a score, a musical score. So we need to develop something that have the same function, but in another context, in a context open to everybody. So all these things were developed together in the same time. So for me, it means like this deep work of collaboration. So maybe I can also show you these two pictures. Yes, during the starts residencies day, I think it's in plural, yeah, this. February this year, we proposed to interact with the audience. So this was nice because we didn't rehearse it before. This is the people that were attempting the event. We just mixed the audience with some performers that know these rules, because the goal of this work is also to create an intuitive environment, like to make it possible musical interaction in a situation that you don't have like lots of time to rehearsal and to think about this as a normal concert. The idea was to put people together and let's do it, let's experiment. So in this case, we also sometimes we are also using some objects, not only the cell phone. And our approach from the cell phone was more directed, more based on movement and sound. So the idea is make people free, especially the point of view of the eyes, to just take the cell phones, use the captors and movement sensors, and let the eyes and the body free to have to allow this interactivity with the other people that are in the same place. So this is people participating of that. And the cell phones in this case turn rope in the musical instruments, because since you have sensors here, everything you touch became a musical instrument in potential. This is also a nice idea, because also in the case of music, we don't, music, body, instrument, they composed a whole thing. So this was also important for us, this approach of the body. And we discuss a lot about this. So I think when you are collaborating this kind of project, we are all time trying to also discuss about our values, conceptions, and it's a very deep process. And this is also the second part of this interaction with the audience, and we are very happy to see how people were participating and engaged in the experience. We have also a small video, as the sound is sometimes from the microphone is not super nice. I think the best thing is to show this video. In this video you can have an idea about that. But basically the work we did was to create these modes of interactivity and small pieces, small projects that are accessible for everybody. So maybe you can have a look on the video together.
Yes.
M'intéressait surtout par le côté accessibilité.
Est-ce qu'on peut détourner cette technologie pour envisager des nouveaux usages et des nouvelles manières d'interagir?
So I think it can give you an idea about how we developed this work. People that you see in the video, they are musicians from an ensemble called Sound Initiative, also from Paris. And now it's wonderful to talk about this project, because we are just finishing the website and putting all the material online that will be available on the ESMM team website, I think in January. So I think you can have an idea. And Fred Bevilacqua is also with us. So if at the end we have technical questions, he's also
Exactly.
here too.
So if anybody watching has any technical questions, drop them in the YouTube chat, and I think he will be able to answer them at the end. Thank you very much for giving us an introduction to constellations. Maybe to end, do you want to say maybe just a couple of words about the title of the work, also how it relates to you, to the whole idea?
Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that you have action in the title, it was something related to a main preoccupation of us, and constellations, because it's this idea of compose small pieces, small available pieces that will be compose something bigger as a whole.
Yeah, and maybe just one last question actually before we move on. How, because you developed this through one of the STARTS residencies, how long did you work? How long was the process of working with IRCAM and the institute who developed the technical backend of the installation and the project?
Mm-hmm. We got I think was the 6 months residency from the start, but in the practice we worked more because we also joined some projects from the team here. I also have some projects with musicians, so we put together many projects. The residency was the start point, as the name said.
Yeah.
But after, it was natural to develop some projects
Keep working
from this project, and at the end, I think we continue to collaborate, and we have many projects for the future. We have a project with a dancer. The idea is also to offer this work as a kind of scene object that can be available for dancers in the workshop with Hervé Robe, and working with some other musicians and students, schools, etc.
Okay. So it's true to the catalyst idea, you know, of starting a process.
Exactly, yeah.
So thank you very much, Michelle, and we can come back with the questions at the end of the session. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker of today, Pei Ying Lin, who is going to talk about her project Proposals of Collaboration with the Viral Entities, which is part of a larger series and includes different kind of projects and artworks. Pei Ying Lin is originally from Taiwan. Currently, she's based in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Her main focus is on the combination of science and human society through artistic methods, and she's particularly interested in building a common discussion ground for cultural perspective regarding elements that construct our individual perception of the world. Recently, she has been focusing on manipulating the boundary of invisible, visible, living, non-living, and finding ways to build tools and methods that facilitate such explorations. Which to me is also something, this last sentence, that is very much visible in proposals of collaboration with the viral entities. So I'm happy to hand over the word to Pei and to talk about her work and project.
Thank you, Kristina, for the introduction. Yeah, I feel very honored to be invited to talk about the project, but this time the presentation will be slightly different from what I usually present. So I will try to sort of guide you through how I actually got the inspiration around viruses through having virus as a topic in the past 10 years and with a lot of discussions with the scientists. So what you see here is an image of the project Virophilia, which is also a part of the proposals of collaborations with the viral entities that I have done during one of the residencies with at the VAG, and as a part of 3 package deal starting from 2018. But so please, next slide. My first attempt on working on viruses was around 2010, so about 10 years ago, I have this project called smallpox syndrome. And I didn't really talk to the scientists back then. So I was looking at how we vaccinate ourselves, like because there were like projections that we will have more and more communicable diseases spread around the world because of globalization, because of the mobility of traveling and all that. So I was speculating a possible future where everybody will be looking at each other and thinking whether you have the newest vaccine or not. And that will sort of decide whether it's safe to have a contact with you or not, so that I don't potentially bring the bugs to my family who are more vulnerable, for example, the elderly or the children. And then in 2016, I got a chance of a residency as a part of the BAT Award, and where I did this project called Tames to Tame with a scientist in Rotterdam. Her name is Miranda de Graft, and she is researching on norovirus. And when we were talking about the viruses, that she mentioned norovirus is one thing that we are unable to develop vaccines yet. And of course, I already sort of knew that the vaccine and human relationship, where the vaccine help us to eradicate smallpox, and that's like the trump of human. And we talk a lot about it. But when she mentioned that norovirus is something that we don't have vaccine against, so in the end, it actually, we always have outbreak of it every year, every month, and around the globe. If one place has it, that every place has it. And it's also very harmful for elderly and children because their immune system is not mature or not well enough, that they end up with a very long time infection, and they will be having diarrhea for the whole year, and eventually they die out of dehydration or failure of organs or something like that. And so we start to explore the possibility that if we have to live with viruses that we are unable to develop vaccines of, could we possibly just trying to live with them, like taming them? And I have to say, this concept sort of that I came up with it, but then she inspires me a lot. And so we had all this, like what we should think of ourselves as individual or a community, whether we think the viruses are where we are their habitat or they're invaders. But also it was really interesting during the discussion that she mentioned this really funny thing, that because for norovirus research, it's puking and diarrhea, that's the symptom. And to study how wide they're gonna spread, they will feed the volunteers, not the patients, but volunteers, this sauce called IPEC sauce that makes you puke. And it makes you puke, so you have this projection vomiting, and they try to observe how far you will be puking and how you will be possibly spreading the norovirus because of this movement of puking. So it sort of triggered me to think about, well, it might be quite fun to simulate the sickness. So it became part of the last project, Tames to Tame, where the virus tamer is trying to drink this tea, and they will get accustomed to this body feeling of puking and diarrhea. But then after that, both the question of we don't have vaccines, and also she also introduced me this concept of biosphere, which I wasn't really aware of before. So biosphere is like the extension of biosphere, and it's being connected by viruses because viruses are considered non-living or semi-living in a way. So when you talk about biosphere, they're not a part of it, but virusphere is like also containing them, and also viruses can connect, they can jump from one species to another species. So it sort of fills the boundary of species a bit. So I was thinking, like, she kept introducing me all this like neutral or even slightly positive direction of viruses. Then can we become more intimate, having a more intimate contact with the viruses when we are aware. And the second was, can we possibly use their ability to something that is what we see as beneficial? But I don't want to be a scientist, so I don't want to go into the detail of curing diseases using genetic therapy. So I thought of, okay, why not let's think about cooking? So because there's no more intimacy that you can have than having a food, and by taking them, getting it into your body and having your body interact with it. So it came to the project of virophilia. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Virophilia is a cookbook, but it's sort of written in 2068 as a research perspective to look at how we might slowly develop this new relationship with viruses. And it gets a lot of inspiration from the scientific research, where if you look at the history of science, there was one point that they didn't know what is virus, and then they discover viruses. And also the person who discovered viruses is a Dutch scientist, and he is also a part of this Delft School of microbiology, where they claim that you should think of the microbes as something that's neutral. And then if we look at the history of human and bacteria, it was also about the recent 30 years that we start to think about probiotics, where we think about bacteria as beneficial for us. So I was suggesting that why don't we think about viruses this way? Maybe it has that. And also during this, it was the scientist Miranda who also introduced me that, well, you can actually use viruses to reset the intestine and the immunity of a mouse. So that's how I began with this book, and we can go to the next slide so you can see the overview of the whole book. It has 5 chapters. The first chapter is originated from my conversation with Miranda, so we were trying to simulating the viral experiences. The second chapter is more inspired with my conversation with the plant scientist, plant virologist from Wageningen University, René van der Vloot. He talked about a lot of mutual beneficial relationship between viruses and plants, where the viruses can make plants more durable to drought, make plants look more interesting, where the tomatoes, about 90% of the tomatoes in the Netherlands are already being vaccinated by papillomavirus, so it doesn't affect the yielding if the farmers accidentally get the tomato plants encounter with more virulent viruses. So all the second chapter was sort of based on what he told me, and then I start to think of how we can use viruses and their interaction with the change of the texture of the plant that we use them in food. The third chapter, viruses as active ingredients, I think it's a mixture of their inspiration, where I was thinking also about our development of vaccines, that sometimes we have a very mild reaction to vaccines. And could it also becomes like a spice that when we eat the virus, it causes slightly tingling feeling or fever on us as an extension of the food experience. Chapter 4 was the inspiration from marine biologist Corinna Broussard. She talked about how she researched the marine viruses, and that the marine viruses actually contribute to the circulation of resource in the sea. And also she mentioned that because algae who lives in the sea, basically there's no boundary in the sea because the viruses can float around freely in the sea. So if the algae encounter the virus, they will try to kill themselves. So the virus won't be able to replicate, and so they can protect their whole species. But that also caused the bubbles that we see when the sea wave is bouncing on the seashore. And sometimes you get very, very foamy bubbles on the sea, because that's the evidence of death of the algae, and it also caused a scent of this, like a little bit like rotten, but probably everyone has the experience if you ever been to the coast, that has a very rich protein smell. And also she showed me a lot of images of how the algae will change color when they got infected by viruses and where they become transparent. So maybe you can see one of the temporal cocktail is literally based on what she told me about. So this image, where you see the oysters, it has the ipex sauce on top of it. And when you eat it, so you will have the puking reaction, while also you experience the physicality or the clue of where the norovirus are, usually because they are very often in the oysters. And the next slide. This influenza egg on rice, it's raw egg on rice, but these eggs are different. It also comes from my experience of working in the lab, where we're trying to replicate the influenza virus. It's a part of my bachelor university training. And then we have to inject the virus into chicken embryos as a way to replicate the virus. So I was thinking, well, then if you put that egg on the rice, then you can inoculate the influenza virus onto your body while also having the influenza symptoms. And so it's a speculative dish where it can act as a vaccine, at the same time give you strange pleasure of eating as well. So we can also go to the next slide. I also trying to transform these sensations into a video. So I have this actress eating the dish while also having text on the side indicating that how the viruses are interacting with her body into very detail. So you will sort of be able to imagine that. And also the next slide. It's also done as a dinner performance. We'll have dishes that's being specially prepared while they're eating. I'm telling them that the dish has viruses in there and how the viruses are entering their body. Ask them to pay attention to their throat. If their throats are starting to hurt a little bit, or tingling, or these kind of sensations, so they will sort of fulfill the part of how the viruses are interacting in their mind with them. And also the last slide, which is the performance that was done during the quarantine this year. So it was a food delivery service, and everybody get the food at home, while the actress also performed at the stage as a live broadcast. And I was also talking about the stories and guiding them to taste the food during that process. So they get their food at home, they don't meet other participants, but they're interacting with each other, interacting with the food online. And that's pretty much my journey with the viruses and the virologists so far.
Thank you very much for giving us an introduction into virophilia. I think what's very interesting to me is kind of having both of your presentations back to back to see this process that Michelle at first described, that she's now at the stage where Constellations is going in a lot of new directions and kind of transforming, and there's going to be like artworks that will be based on it. And then with your work, I think it's very similar, except that you're in a few stages afterwards already, where you've gone through many transitions of this project. So I really kind of like this juxtaposition of both of your stages in the process of the works you are working on, where you can just really see what I think Michelle was mentioning earlier, how this process, once you are in it, kind of really takes you from one approach to the work to a different one. And also, I think what's interesting is you described how you met Miranda de Graaf, your scientist collaborator. So you started out without her, but now she's kind of an integral part, I think, of the process and your discussion. So just a few comments on what I found very interesting in your presentations. And I think we have Tomer joining us now from the Transmeet team.
Yeah, hi. So I have a few questions that were asked here, and we have a few more minutes. So let me maybe ask two. So, the first question was, as an institute that is working across Europe, can you see differences in the nature of collaborations between academic setting and the high-tech companies?
Okay, so this is a question for both Pei and Michelle. Tomer, is it a question for both?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, and so I think the first question is, have you experienced or have you kind of a comparison between the two sides of the coin that was just mentioned? So maybe Michelle wants to go first.
So I don't know if I got everything because the sound like cut it a little. The difference between working with science.
So
sorry, if you can repeat.
The academic setting versus a high-tech
company. Okay, great. Yes, it's very different, especially because the mood here, as you can see, the lab is like, let's do things, and you are less preoccupating about discussing about concepts or the theoretical basis. So, at instance, we didn't work on articles or papers or things like that. It was the case if I was collaborating with academics, but Frederick and this team here, they are very active and very, they are really this kind of inventors and scientific people doing and building things.
Well, yeah, maybe. Well, I guess for me, I'm more usually working with the academics, because I think for the academics, because they are searching for the truth, or like what is the reality, and they are asking very, very philosophical questions all the time, where that sort of also corresponds with what I'm most interested in. So actually, for high-tech companies, because they always want to build something, but then what intrigues me is this virus as a tool to reflect on things. So if I have to work on an innovation, then it doesn't, maybe it still need a lot more steps to come to that point. But while to work with academics, I would say it sort of allows more imaginations, but probably it becomes harder to make it tangible, and that would be the difficulties. But if it's with the high-tech companies, the tangible part becomes more more complicated or more interesting, I would say. Yeah.
Okay,
maybe
thanks.
From my perspective, in the facilitation of also of residencies with high-tech partners, I think a lot of it often comes down to a translation work, companies that are maybe new to collaborating with artists kind of need to be introduced to the language. And there are many, I think, very successful toolkits and methodologies to kind of guide them into this collaborative process. And I would definitely say that within projects like STARTS or within these kinds of residency projects in general, also the institutions, the cultural partners, as the facilitators, spend a lot of time thinking how to facilitate, how to bring together these groups. And I think it's definitely a conscious effort and something that is often helped very much if there's a structure to the collaboration, and also if there is a very open communication from the beginning, and also a kind of translation process between all parties and an openness to the process, I think.
Okay, great, thanks. Maybe just one last question, briefly. There's a question here asking about whether you can see differences in the mode of collaboration, the culture of collaboration, due to the richness of the cultures in the collaborators themselves. There's a lot of richness from the collaborators and where they come from, and whether you can see a different mode of operation when you're a variety of operations when you look at them from your perspective.
Is meant from the perspective of working with different collaborators, so the richness in terms of if you collaborate with lots of different partners, or kind of also with people coming from different fields?
Different fields and different locations. So whether when they come from different cultures, do you see the influence also on the mode of collaboration between the people?
That's interesting. I think artists and scientists, they have this advantage that we are constantly communicating with people from many parts of the world, and as musicians, we are searching for lots of things that are universal for musicians from the whole world. So we have this habit to collaborate a lot with different cultures and people from different places. I think in this sense is almost, for me, a necessity, an impulse to go ahead. I could not do my work if I was just closed inside the boundaries. No, it's something that makes part of our mind, this way to think of, and to communicate with people behind all these boundaries. I don't know if I could answer your question.
Yeah.
I guess from my experience, maybe slightly different from Michelle's, because I had a science background. So when I collaborated with scientists, there are moments that I sort of struggle between whether I have to talk with them in the science language, which also is like a culture for them as well, or should I talk in the artistic language? But in the end, I find the advantage of artistic language is that if you sort of let the scientists aware that they are invited to use the artistic language as well, so they sort of being free from their profession of scientist, and then it becomes really fun because they have this abundant knowledge of science, and now they can just imagine anything without having to, being a scientist and being very well-defined, being very nicely articulated, then the conversation becomes very crazy and very fun. It opens a lot of different opportunities and perspectives. So that's what I find, as you can sort of see the artists and scientists as a collide of different cultures, but when they are being invited to the artistic space, that's the best part that comes out of it that doesn't exist already in what their daily life is.
as a scientist, I can certainly attest that conversations can go very crazy. Okay, we really need to move on to the next session. So I'd like to thank you all for being here and for sharing with us your experience. And we hope to see you soon again. And for the audience, we hope to have you continue with us and also see you tomorrow. So thanks again, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.